Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to the Workology Podcast. This podcast is part of a series on the Workology Podcast that's focused on the roles and responsibilities of the Chief Human Resource Officer, or CHRO. The Workology Podcast is sponsored by Upskill HR and ACE, the HR exam. The CHRO series is powered by Daily Pay and Ginger.io. The CHRO is sometimes called the SVP of HR or the Chief People Officer. It is an executive or C-level role that deals with managing human resources as well as with organizational development and implementing policies of change to overall improve the efficiency of the company. One of the reasons I wanted to do this series is because there's a lot of mystery around that role, the CHRO. I want aspiring CHROs to know what type of skills and experiences they need to promote into a future role as a Chief Human Resource Officer, and also peers to hear from each other about what is working and how they are partnering and collaborating with their executive peers. Today I'm joined with Adriana Bokel. She's the Chief People Officer of Pega. Adriana leads the software company's efforts to attract, develop, and retain the best talent, directing teams focused on talent attraction, career development, performance management, benefits, mental and physical well-being, inclusion and diversity, and social impact. Adriana, welcome to the Workology Podcast.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Pleasure to be here.
Let's start with some background. You have held an HR leadership position or positions for almost 20 years. How has your work evolved over time into that Chief People Officer role?
That's a great question. So I have done, I would say, many different things in my career, both in HR, but also had opportunities to work within the business and doing some sales roles that really brought some different perspectives to my job today. And I have done some time doing people development very early in my career. I've built some recruiting teams and done some recruiting myself. Have done generalist roles, specialist roles. But I would say what really has changed how I see HR was the opportunity to work in other countries, where it gave me really that perspective of being in an office, but in receiving information from headquarters and how a lot of those communications are perceived by people who are not in headquarters. So that gave me a lot to think about it and a lot of food for thoughts to do my job differently today.
I love that. And I don't think in the series that we've had anybody say international work assignments or working in other countries has been key to their career in HR, but I absolutely see why and how that would be useful in your role in supporting executive leaders in the business, but also the employees.
Yes.
What skills and experience do you believe are absolute requirements for the CHRO, especially thinking about those maybe who are just starting out in HR or in the industry?
I would say probably my number one would be open mind. Keep an open mind and have really challenge yourself. It's so easy to come in and have one experience and believe that that is the absolute experience. Companies are so different, and every organization, even at sometimes when you join organizations that are a certain part of their journey. So it is very important that the HR professional has an open mind, that is open to listen, to really truly understand how that organization works and how they can then adapt what experience they have had or their first experience, if that's the case, to that organization, rather than trying to bring what they have learned and really packed into the new company. So I think that is really critical. I would also say really I'm a big believer that HR is not a note taker, that HR is really there to challenge the business, to challenge the leaders, to think differently and to challenge the status quo. So I think that is really important. But with that, you really need to build that credibility first. So really being helpful to the business, showing them how can you help them in their roles as leaders. That is really important to be able to later challenge the organization and especially leaders to think differently about their organizations and their people.
How does, in your mind, the CHRO's role change how company leadership works with HR and vice versa?
Yeah, I think the HR profession has evolved tremendously. And I would say if there is one few things that is positive out of COVID, I would say definitely that has accelerated that change tremendously. And I would say the leadership in the past really saw HR as an administrative back office, people who pay their salaries or benefits, and now has evolved to be a strategic talent role that really informs and evolves with the organization strategy and how talent is used or needs to be adapted as the organization evolves. And that is, I really see not only here at Pega that change has happened, but also with other CHROs and chief people officer colleagues that I have, that conversation has started to change probably in the last, I would say, 4 to 5 years.
I agree with you that COVID has really advanced the HR profession, put us right up in the forefront of the business. And if that is one good thing that comes out of this, I'm grateful that that business leaders are waking up and realizing the real value that a strategic HR partner truly has on the business.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about working during the pandemic. What has it been like for your 6,000 global employees as well as your HR team? Talk to us a little bit about that.
It has been hard, and I would say it's still hard. To some extent, we are still all at home. We still slowly now having conversations about going back to the office. Our offices have remained open through the entire time, but we don't have many people to actually go into those offices. So we still are working mainly from home. And it has been hard, I think, first is because it was the unknown. Nobody really knew how long it was going to take and would be the impact. I feel very lucky that we didn't have to do any reduce in force. We actually continue performing really well, and we were supporting our clients. We are in a digital transformation world here, so that became even more important during the pandemic. But there is also the personal side, and people's lives have totally changed during that time. We had people with small kids, we had people with elderly parents or families, and to adapt and also to show to some managers who might not who is not in the situation that employee is, how to build a little bit the empathy on everyone, that everybody was in a different situation and people might need a little bit more flexibility here, a little bit more flexibility there. That was a big part of not only what my team in the HR function did, but also even broadly, we tried to convey that to the 6,000 employees, in addition to try to support them with different measures to make them a little bit a better work-life balance, because it was hard, and it's still hard when everybody's at home.
Let's take a reset. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you are listening to the Workology podcast. We're talking about global CHRO roles and pivots during the pandemic with Adriana Bokel. The Workology podcast is sponsored by Upskill HR and ACE, the HR exam. The CHRO series is powered by Daily Pay and Ginger.io. Personal and professional development is essential for successful HR leaders. Join Upskill HR to access live training, community, and over 100 on-demand courses for the dynamic leader. HR Restart credits available. Visit upskillhr.com for more. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you and your team have been doing to support employees. 1/3 of your employees are located in India, which we all know, and if we don't, we should know that that country has been severely impacted by the global pandemic. Can you talk about the support you set up for this segment of your employee population and their families?
Sure. Yeah, so we have done certain things that we did for the entire global organization very early in the pandemic with things like fitness apps or opportunities to do mindfulness training. But specifically to that group in India, what we have set was that we arranged, I would almost say like a call center. We didn't call that a call center, but just to explain to the people listening, a call center within our organization to help people get beds for their families if they were running out of oxygen and getting oxygen out there, because it was just not, the infrastructure in India is so very, very different than what we have seen across the world in the other countries that we have employees. So we set up that call center knowing that we couldn't provide those beds ourselves, but trying to connect them to hospitals that might potentially have the beds for those employees. We also, about a month ago, did our own vaccination drives in both of our locations and vaccinated about 25% of our population and their families, which was a great employee engagement event at the end. Wasn't how it started, but people were just very, very grateful that we bought the vaccines and we provided to them, because differently than in many of the countries like the US and Europe, the government wasn't able to catch up with all the demand. So a lot of the companies were trying to see how they could help and get their employee population vaccinated as well.
When you told me this story on the prep call, I mean, it really got me emotional, because I was just thinking about picturing employees from your company on the phone, trying to call to get hospital beds and oxygen for people, employees and their family members in need. And I, that just goes above and beyond. And it really just is a testament, I think, to the culture that you have and the ability for the organization and the employees within your organization to think differently and flex and pivot to the specific needs of employees in that country.
Yeah, and I think it was really like, we really care very much. I mean, I care very much. My entire team cares very much. The leadership team, we saw the desperation in our employee population, in our leaders there. We wish we could do it even more. So these were little things that just showed the staff we are there for them. I would say the other thing we have done that is still in place today, and we did offer that globally, we did an employee fund where our employees contributed to support employees that might have been negatively impacted or their families. So we luckily didn't have to do any layoffs because of that, but of course other companies have, and these are people who are husbands and wives and partners. So for anyone that their partners have lost their jobs, we also were able to give some financial contribution. And some of the emails, thank you emails I receive, Jessica, were just like, I keep them, I show them to my kids, because these are the little things that make such a difference in people's life. And that makes them also independent if they stay at Pega or go somewhere. I think that type of generosity is something that sticks to people, and that also shows how generous, but also how caring Pega is as a company.
It just really shows the humanity that the leadership and management team and everybody at Pega has and able to support employees and their families. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk more about your global HR team, because you have employees in many different countries, and talk to me about how your HR team is structured.
Sure. Yeah, so one of the things before I even talk about the structure, just as good information to have, is that we do all our recruitment in-house. So a lot of the people that we have are in recruitment. We call here talent attraction. So for the 6,000 employees that we have about 150 people in the people function. And from that group, about half of that is involving in our talent attraction, either through being recruiters themselves or recruiting coordinators that support their recruitment. We hire about 1,000 to 1,400 people every year. And that is mainly the group that supports that. So I have a specific group. So I'll talk about a little bit about my direct reports, because that helps understand the structure. So I have Pega is divided into two main functions. One I would call the go-to-market business, which is our sales, our technical solution consultants, our marketing, our business operations. So this is about half, about 3,000 employees. The other half is what we call the technology and the corporate functions. So I build that structure, my structure around that business structure. So I have two heads of what we call here talent advisory, which I think outside is usually called HR business partners. So I have one that supports the go-to-market, one that supports technology and corporate functions. And I did the same for my talent attraction. So I have one leader that supports the go-to-market in recruitment, and one leader that supports the team in the technology and the corporate function. So these are 4 leaders. They all report to me, and they have global organizations under them, mostly by region. So they have groups that are in Europe, and a team that are in APJ, and of course a team in India. So, but this is by within those functions. I also have what traditionally is called Center of Excellence, or COEs. So I have one leader that supports us on the I&D, and we call here on purpose inclusion and diversity rather than diversity and inclusion, because we truly believe inclusion comes first. And then I have somebody who is supporting our talent programs. And under talent programs, I include talent management, what we call here talent branding, or employer branding. I also have there our onboarding efforts. We also have the talent recognition or talent experience. So that's part of what we call talent programs. And of course, the leadership development and learning is part of that. And then I have one more group that is supports what we call here people services, which is the traditional HR operations. And that whole group of people services includes comp and ben, includes the people operations, includes people analytics. And we also just recently opened for the first time and started a people relations function as well, which is led by the people service leader. And I do have a chief of staff. She does a lot of the organizational design work with me, and organizational effectiveness and survey. And I would not be able to do as much as I do without her. So that is my group and my team. And under them, their organizations is often through mostly in the COEs, they are global roles. And in the talent acquisition and talent advisory, they have a regional setup under them.
And then as far as who do you report to in the organization?
So I report to the CEO, the founder and CEO, Alan Treffler. And that is something personally very important to me. Before I joined Pega, and often now as well, when I get reach outs, I wouldn't consider today a role of a CPO or chief HR officer that it doesn't report to the CEO. I find that this really is very telling, and this is such an important role that touches so many other parts of the organization, and that reporting lines and that connection to the CEO is very important.
I'm just fascinated by all the interviews that we've done, and then of course who reports to who and how the organizational structure is. So I can see you're talking and I'm listening, and I'm drawing a picture of your organizational chart within HR while you're talking. I hope that others are learning, because there's so many different ways to structure
Totally.
the HR organization.
And I think the most important thing really is there's not a right or wrong. I think what is important for HR leaders is really to structure their own organizations in support of the business. And depending on what the business strategy is or the business setup, that is how your organization needs to be mirrored, rather than trying to do something that is the traditional HR, because at the end of the day will not work for the company.
Agreed. I want to talk about what it's going to look like for the company and your team and your employees when they return to work, or whatever the new normal is going to be, because you and your team, I feel like, have a really interesting approach to the blend of on-site and remote staff, and how you are going to be taking advantage of the hybrid model. Could you talk us through that?
Of course. Yeah. So as most companies, I would say we are still learning. And I actually do have a call today to finalize some of that and how we will communicate. So our first group planning to go back to the office will be September here in the US, because that's the country we feel things with the vaccination a little further. So we will use that as an opportunity. And the way we have defined here is that we have built 5 different categories, which goes from full office base to office flex. And I'll go back and explain each one of them, but we just go from office full, office flex, remote flex, remote close to the client, and remote full. And within those 5 categories, we went role by role that we have it in the company and assigned each role a hybrid or a category of that remote. And we didn't go by person. We did that on purpose. We did by role, knowing that there will always be exceptions everywhere. But we wanted to have a discussion with the leadership on what would make a role be able to be remote or not remote. I just, out of transparency here, we already had about 35% of our organization remote, because they are in our sales organization. So this was about being more concrete about the rest of that. Around the 65, we did have people that were remote. We had people that came to the office only 1 or twice a week. But we really said, okay, let's just start from scratch, build those 5 categories and talk about the expectations around them. We have made decisions, at least for now, that says, okay, we'll want to make it truly flexible. So we're not going to dictate which days people come to the office. Hopeful that the managers will have those conversations with their teams. We have decided, and it just happened because of the pandemic, it wasn't planned before, but we took the opportunity in the US to move to a different location and really now go truly, I would call hybrid, if you will, in a way that there will be no more assigned desks in the new offices here in the US, and the people will have neighborhoods. So there will be the people function neighborhood, there will be the finance neighborhood, there will be the sales neighborhood. So people, when they do come to the office, they will be able to aggregate together. They will be able to choose a seat in their neighborhood, but there will be no longer assigned desks. And we are hoping, one thing I think we are calling here, we don't want the office to be a mandate. We want the office to be something that people come because they want to. So we did a slogan called, we don't want the office to be a mandate, we want the office to be a magnet. So to really support that collaboration and innovation when people are in the office, knowing that some people who are living far away from the offices would like to come to the office to collaborate, but it might not come as often as people who are around if they are in Massachusetts, around Cambridge or around the office in Waltham.
I love this approach, and I love that you're not a mandate, but a magnet. And I think comes to mind in the news as of recent is Apple's backlash that they received when they mandated that employees come to the office and come back, and the response of the employees. So I love that you're taking this individualized approach, and that the managers are talking to the employees and asking them questions, and working on a smaller like team basis versus, hey, entire organization, everybody's coming back and you're all going to do this.
Yeah, and one thing, I mean, they use, as you said, it's against Jiffy, and I think we are learning about it as well. We're hoping this will work. Being also an HR professional, there's always the risk with that approach that in some departments will be perceived as more flexible and some others less flexible. But at this point in time, I really believe we need to empower our managers and empower the staff to have those conversations. And it's never, ever going to be perfectly for 6,000 people. So people have to make their own decisions, and conversations is really, for me, the beginning of a new approach, and make sure that works for the business.
Awesome. Well, I love the approach that you're taking, where it's a moving target a little bit, but you're going to check in with your people.
That's correct.
What is the best leadership advice that you've received in your own career? I really want aspiring HR leaders, maybe HR leaders who are interested in that CHRO role, or moving up in their career. What leadership advice could you give them?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, and I have been thinking about it. And I would say there's two that I would like to give that to you and to people listening here. And I think one is particularly important, being part of an HR organization. So I was always told, and I think it is true about me personally, is that I should get a hobby and I should stop caring too much. That I care too much, and that sometimes that plays against me. And I would say I take that as a positive, but I also think it's important in people's careers that you take care of yourself, and that in the end of the day, you can only take care of others if you are well with yourself, both physically, mentally, and everything else that comes with it. So I want to say that because it's, especially in a pandemic year, it's so easy to feel overwhelmed. And if we don't take care of ourselves, then we also cannot take care of our people, and of course, broader the employee population. That would be, I think, one thing that I keep reminding myself often, especially when I do feel overwhelmed. In the pandemic, there were more than once in that case. And I would say the other thing is, I heard that from one of my mentors, is that what brought me here to that role will not be bring me to the next. That means that I always have to continue learning and being open to learning new things, but also challenging myself on listening to what's happening outside my own company and my own comfort zone.
Awesome. Both really two pieces of sound advice. Adriana, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Where can people go to learn more about you and Pega?
So I'm in LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to have conversations with people, to have people to reach out. I have used those moments on myself, on my own career, and look for advice of others, and even just be a sounding board to other people. And Pega is an amazing company. We are at Pega.com. We have over 700 open opportunities out there. And I'm happy to answer questions that people might have about the company or about certain roles. So we are happy to continue the dialogue after the podcast.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time. You are really an inspiration, and I love just your spirit and just how you are helping to support the organization. It's really inspiring.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you for your time and for the reach out. And if I can be of any help, I'm happy to.
Are you loving the Workology podcast? Our Workology community reaches over 600,000 HR leaders every single month. Want to be a sponsor? Reach out to us at workology.com/advertising. It's really interesting to delve into how a role like the CHRO, whose experiences more closely connect them to strategy and operations of the overall business, with the rest of the company's leadership team around the topics of innovation, inclusion and diversity, and business partnerships. When we think about Adriana and her experience during a pandemic at a global organization, it is clear that the CHRO doesn't just lead HR within the company. The role is key to structuring the leadership and the future success of the company overall. I appreciate Adriana taking her time to share with us her experience today, and I really loved her breaking down the HR organizational structure and talking about the different types of return to work strategies that Pega and her team are going to be deploying here soon. Thank you for joining the Workology podcast. The Workology podcast is sponsored by Upskill HR and ACE, the HR exam. The CHRO series is powered by Daily Pay and Ginger.io. This podcast is for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. My name is Jessica Miller Merrill, and until next time, you can visit Workology.com to listen to all our Workology podcast episodes.